Hey, Hillsborough. It is great to be with you folks this morning. I wish that I was able to be with you in there in person. I wish we could kind of knock elbows and chat after the service. Unfortunately, I'm just not able to be there this morning. I am coming at you from the metropolis of LA. That would be Lower Appahock for the uninformed. It's great to be with you. I love what God is up to at Hillsborough Baptist Church and also through the Albert County network that you folks are all leading. It's great, isn't it, to be a part of this Canadian Baptist of Atlantic family all across this region, just sort of linking arms in ministry and mission all across these four great provinces, just doing what God has called us to do in neighborhoods all across Atlantic Canada. We are indeed stronger together. And as we work together for the sake of the kingdom, God is doing some great things all across this region. So I just say to you, thanks, folks, for being a part of this family. We're stronger together, better together, and we appreciate your connection and your part of this family. I want to say hi to your pastor, too. Your pastor, Jeff, and I go back a lot of years. We used to sit around a table called Reboot together, sort of a mentoring table with leaders for many years. And then I was able to sort of supervise him during his ordination year. We had a lot of fun during that time. And now to be able to watch his sharp, keen leadership as he leads the church, and also as you develop the Albert County network, it's just been a real privilege for me to be involved in his life. And a few years ago when he asked me about leaving St. Martin's and going to Hillsborough, I said, Jeff, now's the time. Now's the time. And it has been the time. And God is doing some incredible things in your midst. And I'm just excited to watch that. And I want to say to you, I know you know this, but look up here. Look up here. I know you know this. You have a great pastor, folks. You have a great pastor. You have a pastor with a heart for Jesus. You have a pastor with a heart for you. You have a pastor with a heart for your community. And you have a pastor with a heart for those who have yet to really experience the transforming power and love of Jesus Christ in their lives. You have a great pastor. And so I want to say to you, when you do, you want to love him. You want to value him. You want to follow him. You want to cheerlead him. Because you have a great pastor. And I might know this a little better than you. Great pastors aren't always easy to come by. So when you have one, follow them, cheerlead them, love them, encourage them. Just get behind him. And I know that you're doing that, but I felt that I needed to say that to you. And that could be what some might call a word to the wise. Why don't we just jump right into the story, jump right into the scripture this morning, shall we? 1 Kings 19, verses 11 to 13. That's where we're going to go in just a moment. So if you want to look that up, it's 9 or 10 books into the Old Testament. You can look that up, and we're going to get there in just a second. But before we get there, let me give to you just a little bit of context. In 1 Kings, we find that the great prophet Elijah has just come through an enormous victory. It's been a huge victory. He had defeated hundreds of prophets of Baal on the side of a mountain. Baal had proven that he had the inability to act. He had proven that he had the inability to show, to prove that he was deity. They'd prayed for Baal to light the fire on this altar, on this sacrifice. And they prayed and they danced and they hollered and they cut themselves with knives. And Baal could not light the fire. Some of you remember that it was Elijah's turn. And Yahweh did respond after Elijah's prayers. He proved that he, in fact, was God. The prophets had come and they doused and they poured water all over the sacrifice and water all over the altar. And they doused it and put some more water on, put some more water on, put some more water on, add a little more, add a little more, add a little more, again and again and again. And then Elijah stood and Elijah prayed to his God. And the scripture tells us that fire fell from heaven. And the sacrifice and the wood and the water was all consumed. And the scripture says, in fact, that the fire licked up the water in the trench. It's been a few great spiritual days in the life and in the ministry of Elijah. God was victorious, and Elijah was the face of that victory. But now there's a bounty on Elijah's head, and he's ticked off some pretty important people, including the queen, and he feels all alone, and he's feeling discouraged, and Elijah is now feeling depressed, and he feels like he's the only one around that's still trying to be faithful to God, and he wonders where his team has gone. Am I the only one now that's committed to the mission of God, where did everybody go? And God directs Elijah in 1 Kings. He directs Elijah to get up. Elijah's feeling sorry for himself. And he directs Elijah to travel 40 days and go to a place called Mount Horeb. And so Elijah does. He goes to Mount Horeb and he spends a night in a cave. And God appears to Elijah at that time. 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 11, if you want to follow along with me. The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." And then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind there was an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake there came a fire. And the scripture says, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the scripture says, came a gentle whisper. And then it says, Elijah heard it. He heard it. We're going to come back to that story in just a couple of minutes. When I was 40 years old, I was 65 pounds heavier than I am today. And in July of my 40th year, I would have what I call my moment of clarity. I'm not going to go into that, but I saw myself clearly one day. I was in front of 200 young people on a 20-foot video screen at a Christian hockey camp. I'm sitting at the back of this auditorium as these kids are watching this 20-foot screen, and I'm on the screen as a guy 65 pounds heavier than I am today. And I look up and I thought, as I look at that screen, who is that guy? How did that happen to that guy? When did that guy become that? I looked at the screen and I saw myself in this new way, and I had my moment. And at that time, I thought, something's got to change. So I put together an eating regime. I put together an exercise regime. And a huge part of that was road cycling. I bought a road bike. I bought a road helmet. I bought all the gear that I needed to be a road cyclist. I graduated very quickly to some cycling spandex. Stuff should never be sold to a fat guy. And over about 6 months, I lost the weight. And now for 15 years, I work to keep it off every day. I don't know what you know about road cycling, but the bikes that you ride are much like the old, some of you remember those old 10-speeds. They had those old curled handlebars, and after a while, I in fact graduated in what they call clipless pedals. So clipless pedals you have your riding shoe, your cycling shoe, and there's a cleat, and the cleat sort of locks into the shoe, and it creates sort of a push and a pull, and a push and a pull, and it creates a much more efficient riding stride as you ride, much more efficient and effective. However, much more dangerous because you're locked into the cleat and locked into the bike. My grade 10 English teacher would call that foreshadowing. So I'm out for a ride one day. I leave my home in Appahawk. I'm heading towards Sussex. I leave Appahawk. I go through Roachville. As I go through Roachville, I come to Sussex Corner. I'm coming down Main Street through Sussex Corner. I'm flying. My heart rate is up. I'm on what I would be certain was an Olympic pace. I'm flying down Main Street. I pass Tim Hortons. After I pass Tim Hortons on Main Street, I pass the TD, the Toronto Dominion Bank. Just as I come up to Greg Balcom's Source for Sports store, there is what we call in Sussex a nut in a truck. And he decides that he's going to pull out in front of me. He doesn't look. He doesn't care. He doesn't have to. He's in this great big truck with great big huge tires, probably a a 12 or 14-inch lift kit. He's got Remington gun stickers on the side of his truck, and he's got naked mermaid decals in the back window. Don't picture that. At this point, I would say time stood still. The only thing that I could see as the truck pulls out in front of me, and as I approach the truck, the only thing that I could see is his huge chrome bumper and a topless mermaid sticker in the back window. And so what do? I locked up my brakes. And as I lock up my brakes, I could begin to feel my back wheel wanting to lift off the ground and move forward in front of my front wheel. What happens? I completely flip and roll. My back wheel lands, and I land, and I roll, and I roll, and I roll, and I roll. And remember I told you my shoes are locked in there, clipped into the pedals, so the bike is coming with me, it's coming with me, it's coming with me. Finally, those clipless pedals release, and I'm landing there on land there on Main Street in the middle of the road. And the Joker in the mermaid truck doesn't even notice. He just drives away. So when I finally come to a stop, what do? Well, I would say in an embarrassing display of what I would call masculine pride and male ego, I grab my bike, I grab my water bottle, I pop back up, and I act as if nothing happens. I kind of lean on the side of my bike, I take a drink. Greg Balcom runs out of the Source for Sports store. Kevin, are you okay? Are you okay? I said, Greg, no, good. Just taking a break, buddy. It's just the way that I ride. I'm fine. But listen, stay with me, because here's what I learned. Eventually, if I don't change my ways, if I don't change the way that I ride, if I don't recognize how the riding conditions have changed, that my town is busier now, that there's more traffic, that there's increased preoccupation and increased texting and media screens and distracted driving, if I don't begin to recognize that the culture and the riding day has changed, that I'm riding in a brand new environment, enough crashes like that one, and eventually, at some point, I won't get back up. Now stay with me. The church is riding in a brand new day. Everything has changed. You know, for years we've been saying that. For years we've been saying our culture is post-Christian now. We're post-modern now. We're post this and we're post that. And we must change and we must change and we must change and we must change. We know we must change. We want to change, but we haven't. And then in 2020, COVID-19 showed up. And everything changed. And so did we. We adjusted. We pivoted. We became. We morphed into what we needed to be in this chapter, and we proved that we could. And we started doing things in this chapter that we never could have imagined and that we would have voted against previously, right? And in this chapter, what happened? God showed up. God showed up. And he showed up in some pretty exciting and unexpected ways all across Atlantic Canada in the middle of a pandemic. And perhaps he started to wake us up to who we need to be in this new day. See, COVID, I believe, has given the church a gift. I call it forced experimentation. A new awareness that, yes, we can. Yes, we can. It can happen here. We can change if we have to, darn it. We can change. We can shift. We can pivot. We can become who we need to be. And God has taught us that, and we can't lose that now that we've embraced that posture. The future of the church has arrived far more quickly than we ever could have imagined or anticipated. And you know what we did? we adjusted. We changed into what we needed to be. You see, moving forward, there's really no clear path now. There's no clear model now. We used to know years ago how to do church, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. We knew how to do church. You'd open the doors and people would show up. Imagine. You open the doors, people would show up. You throw a midweek children's program and kids would show up. Imagine. Not today. Everything has changed. So moving forward, what's the answer? What's the answer for the church? Who is God calling us to be? Elijah gives us the answer in 4 words, standing outside of a cave on the mountainside. Elijah gives us the answer. If you forget everything else that I say to you today, remember these 4 words. Listen for the whisper. Listen for the whisper. The answer is in the stillness. Listen for the whisper. Elijah stood on the side of a mountain and God said, I'm going to speak. And a great and a powerful wind tore the mountains apart and it shattered the rocks. And the scripture said, but the voice of the Lord wasn't in the raging wind. And after the wind, there was an earthquake. And it shook the foundations of the world. And the voice of the Lord, the scripture says, was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, there was a fire. And the word of the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a whisper and a voice said to Elijah. And Elijah heard it in the whisper. Did you catch it? Did you catch it? Listen for the whisper. The summer of 1996, Sandra and I returned to a little village in southern New Brunswick, a place called Abhock. It's my hometown, 300 people. We were sent back there by God to replant a tiny little church of 6 people. Sandra and I didn't have a clue what to do. We were youth pastors. We weren't church planters. So how do you build a church there? How do you build a church with 6 people? How do you build a church with 6 people who are all in their 70s or 80s? Actually, that's not true. There was Ruth. Ruth was in her 50s. We used to call her the youth group. How do you do that? How do you build a church with 6 people? How do you do that? And we thought, well, why don't we just ask the neighborhood? Why don't we ask the people? Why don't we ask the people around us? And so we carried out just a very simple community survey, and we asked 3 simple questions. But the big question at the end of the survey really was, what does this community need? What does the neighborhood need? What if you could identify the 1 or 2 biggest needs for this community? What would you say that this community needs? What's lacking? And we started to hear an answer. The community started to say to us, we need a place that simply loves kids. We need a place that's committed to families. There's no kids programs here. There's nothing really here for children. The community started to speak through a simple survey. It wasn't a raging wind. It wasn't a fire. It wasn't an earthquake. There was no loud voice from heaven that descended. God just started to whisper to us. Just be the church for kids. Just be the church for kids. That's what I'm up to, God said. And so we did. We did. We uncovered that in fact God was already at work in homes all around our community. It was amazing. We couldn't have known that. We couldn't have known what God was doing. He was already at work. Can you imagine? God was already at work in homes in our neighborhood. And we started investing in kids, and we started investing in children, and they started to come, and their parents started to come, and that little church over The next 20 years, that little church of 6 over 20 years became a church of 600 plus. And it all started with a whisper. Listen. Listen for the whisper. I don't know what God is up to in your neighborhood around your church, but I know that God knows. I know that he was there before you. I know that he was there before you showed up. I know that he has a passion for your neighborhood. He has a passion for the people all around your church. And I know that he is inviting you in to what he is already doing. And I know that some of what he's going to call you to do is going to be painful because it's not going to look the same, folks. It's going to change. There's going to be some painful choices that you're going to need to make. You're going to choose some pain, and you're going to choose some paths. You're going to choose to do some things that aren't your personal preference, things that you might not even like, but things that could potentially have some kingdom potential. And you're going to lay aside your preferences and wants and desires for the kingdom's sake. For God's sake. Can I share a little bit with you what I sort of see happening as we move into this new chapter? I believe that we're going to see the church begin to shift and to change. We're going to begin to do church differently, and the church model that we've traditionally used is going to begin to change, I believe. I think we're going to shift. We're going to see this shift from what we could call a Sunday-centric kind of model of church. And in fact, it might even be a return to what we even more closely see in the book of Acts, in Acts chapter 2. I mean, we're living in a time of chaotic disruption, and it's painful and confusing, and we're trying to figure out, how do we be the church today in this new day? You know, if I jumped back into pastoral ministry tomorrow, if God called me out of this role and said, I want you to go back in to lead a local congregation again, what would I do? What would I do? How would it look different? What model of church ministry would serve the neighborhood best that God called me into? What's God whispering? Let me dream for you for just a minute. Just let me dream for you for a minute. And here's what I think I would do. I would place 100% of energy into 3 different directions. Not 30, 30, 30 to make 100, but 100, 100, 100 in 3 different directions. Number 1, I would place 100% into our Sunday congregation. I'd still go 100% on Sunday. Of course, we know that Sunday is limited in terms of reaching our neighbors, in terms of evangelism and reaching out. We know that. All the studies show that. We know that it's true for our unchurched neighbors, that they're not looking for you. They're not looking for your church. But Sunday still remains a traditional form of gathering, like you're doing right now. And it's meaningful. It's meaningful for many of you, and it still remains important for the church to do in this time. It's meaningful for many of you, right? And it would simply be dishonoring to end it. It would be a mistake just to say we're not doing that anymore. We need to do it with excellence. We need to do it with relevance. There needs to be some tweaks and some changes and some shifting, and we need to do it better, and we need to adjust if we're going to maintain some traction and to grow that traction. But we can't abandon Sunday morning. I'd go 100% on Sunday morning physical, face-to-face, physical church Sunday morning. It remains a piece of who we need to be. Secondly, I'd go 100% digital. There's no option now. This is more than a whisper. The online expression of church is the new front door. COVID has been the great accelerator for that. The truth is that the majority of the people that your church touches will not be in the room, and in fact, they might never be in the room that you're sitting in right now. Think about that. Let me give you 2 practical hints. As we think about the online expression of church, let me give you 2 hints. Number 1, if you're going to go 100% digital, you've got to support it. You've got to support it. You've got to support it with staff, either paid or volunteer. You've got to support it to the same degree that you're going to support your physical expression of church on Sunday morning. You have no choice, because people are going to realize that really, really quickly if you're not committed to it. Secondly, You need to understand that your congregation and your neighborhood exist in a certain context. You need to understand the resources that you have and the context that you are in. This is going to impact what you can do and what you will do. Some churches are going to be able to have this full-blown online church congregation. Other churches in a different context, in a different community with different resources are going to have more of an online engagement strategy where they connect with people in a different way. But it will be determined by the context and the resources. But simply go 100% and do it with the excellence that you're capable of. That's number 2. And the third thing I would go 100% on is this. 100% physical, 100% digital online, and 100% micro. Moving forward, I believe for your church to be effective, your church will not be one church, one congregation meeting on Sunday morning, but it will become, I believe, and this is what I would do, a network of multiplied, smaller congregations meeting on Sunday, yes, but meeting on various days of the week, all legitimate congregations, all tethered to your main church. But congregations with different people that call your church home, but they never show up on Sunday, perhaps. They may just eventually meet up in heaven. Maybe it's a Tuesday night congregation in a cafe, or maybe it's a Thursday morning seniors complex congregation, or a Friday night family house church. Multiplied congregations. Multiple congregations. Imagine, what could that look like? If we get outside and we begin to understand our neighborhood and step into our city, step into our community and watch and see and listen for the whisper. Just to see what God is up to, who he's calling us to be in this new day, and to simply join him there. You see, the whisper is your hope. The whisper is your hope. Very few people are looking for your church anymore. But more than ever, those same people have those same deep human needs that only Jesus can meet. Where is God already active? Where can you see him at work? It will be revealed in the quiet, in a prompting, in a whisper. In Arthur Miller's famous play, Death of a Salesman, some of you might be familiar with that, Willie Loman is the main character. And Willie Loman had lived a really tragic life as a struggling salesman, sort of chasing dreams that he was never able to achieve or accomplish. And in the final act of the play, we're standing in this play at his graveside. And Willie had tragically committed suicide. And at the graveside, only his wife and his son are standing there. And in the uncomfortable quiet of the moment, Willie's wife looks at his son and she says, "Why did he do it, Biff? Why did he do it?" And Biff looks at his mom and he looks down into the grave. He looks back up at his mom and he says, "Oh, shucks, Mom. Oh, shucks. He had all the wrong dreams. He had all the wrong dreams." And Elijah stood on the side of a mountain and the Lord passed by. And a mighty windstorm hit the mountain, but the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, there was an earthquake, and the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, and the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, there was a sound of a gentle whisper. And Elijah heard it. He heard it. What is your dream for your church. Listen. Listen, listen for the whisper. And step out. God bless you all. God bless you all.